Hello. It is football time once again. Welcome back to SpOKen Freely. I am your host, Glen Brockenbush. This is the internet sports talk show where we talk anything and everything sports related in the great state of Oklahoma. And what do you know it? I have two guests this week because it just wouldn't feel right. I had Billy Palmer back this week for a second week in the row. But I kind of got called out on social media last week by one Vinny Saylor. Said, man, this hurts. I'm not going to lie. You had my old partner on and not me. And I said, that's because we're waiting, my friend. Because this week, as the high school season enters week two, week two, technically, we have a big one, a couple big ones in Comanche County. We'll talk a little bit about the second Lawton City rivalry game of the season coming up in a second. But the Battle of the Wichitas is a special rivalry. Elgin versus Cache. It might not have the same panache, if you will, of other rivalries just because neither team has had a ton of playoff success as programs. But in terms of rabid fan bases and passion, it's one of my favorite sporting events that I've gotten to cover. And we have a special battle of the broadcasters here because almost a house divided, except they don't live in the same house, so I don't know what I'm saying. But Billy and Vinny were broadcast partners for what? More than a season, right? Was it 2 years?
2 seasons, yeah. 2 seasons.
As the voices of the Cache Bulldogs, and then Vincent, you went to the other side, man. I know you already lived over there, but you are now the color commentator of the Elgin Owls. How is that going for you, first of all? And second of all, do you think it's going to feel weird on Friday night, considering these are kids that you knew for, 3-4 years, however many it was that you worked with Cache?
Yeah. So 3 years, I guess, with Cache, 2 years there with Billy. My first year at OSN actually was with Elgin. So I'm kind of going back to Elgin. My kids go to school there. My daughter's in kindergarten there, and we live here, and it just made more sense to go with the home team. So we worked a couple things out, had to leave Billy in the dust, but I think he's doing okay.
How dare you?
Got a good partner in Matt Bowling now. He's a grad student up at OU, and he worked Friday was our first game, so had some chemistry there off the bat, so it was good to work with him, and it was great to see Elgin come away with the victory. But as far as Cache goes, yeah, it's going to be a little different. Obviously, first of all, we'll be on top of the booth, so that's going to be something odd in and of itself.
Billy, point out real quick, as Billy is clearly at Ulrich Stadium as we speak.
I'll be right here, and Vincent will be like here somewhere.
So if you're listening to the Cache broadcast and you hear a bunch of thumping, that's me just beating on the roof of the press box while I'm sweating and dancing and doing everything that I usually do in the booth.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's what true friendship sounds like.
Right.
That's just being a good friend.
It'll be a little odd. I mean, a lot of the kids that are there playing now at Cache, I mean, we're young kids. They got some action, so it's not so much the kids, but developed a pretty good, close relationship with Coach Griffin. So that'll be odd. He was at the Elgin Bethany scrimmage, and I was at the game on the sidelines, kind of watching to figure out what Elgin had this year. And he sent me a text message, said, "It's sure odd to see you on that sideline." So that'll probably be the toughest part, kind of commentating and being a homer for Elgin and kind of going against Coach Griffin and Tanner Thompson and some of those guys that kind of got a little bit of a relationship with those guys. So that'll be a little odd, but
so here, Vincent, here's what he's asking you.
It'll be nothing but no owls in my booth.
Yeah.
He's asking you, Vincent, do you miss me? That's what
Billy, I know I miss you a ton. I can only imagine how much you miss my yelling and screaming and dancing and singing.
The dancing I will absolutely vouch for because I've been in the booth with you guys, and it is a dadgum party. It's one of the best things that I feel like we're missing out on this year in the elephant in the room is Battle of Wichita is now a non-district contest because Elgin moved it up to 5A. And one of the best things for me covering Cache versus Elgin was it almost always was right after Halloween, and Vincent always had Halloween candy that he stole from his kids.
That is very true.
He's just like, no, man, this is just the parent tax. This is what you get, Glenn, when you have kids. Like, I was like, you make it seem appealing.
It doesn't have to be Halloween for him. He brings candy every single time.
Well, I noticed you had some num-nums with you too, Billy, when I covered
I got that from him. It became a habit.
I learned it from watching you, Dad. I learned it from watching
week, Billy. I did not bring candy to the booth. I tried to refrain.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was a long day though. I was struggling.
Like, not to make fun of addiction, but it's almost like, I know for me as a sugar addict myself, it is almost like the person that doesn't have their coffee or their cigarette that day. I'm like, come on, man. Like, I'm not.
Well, Christian Lawyer,
don't mess with me.
Christian, as he would listen to our broadcast, he'd say, "Dude, I can hear you smacking on your candy. Quit." So I figured
I'm unprofessional.
Right. So I figured I'd go a little bit more professional this year, and with rain for the candy. And obviously I'm not gonna be able to bring candy to Cache if we're gonna be out in the elements. I mean, I don't want my candy to go flying into the stands.
Oh yeah, those Oklahoma winds, man. You gotta be careful. Now both teams this past week played on the road. Now, as you mentioned, Vinny, Elgin played their season opener. Cache played on week 0 in a loss to Tuttle, a game that I was at, and a game that Billy and I briefly talked about last week. Elgin went to Anadarko, which, by the way, shout out to Anadarko with that really nice new turf. That looked phenomenal. And I've always liked that stadium. I've only covered one game there, which oddly enough was last year's Elgin and Anadarko game. And that's again, much like Elgin and Cache, a fan base that just loves its sports, and especially with the success that they've had under Kent Jackson, that's a Darko fan base that expects to win. And given how the first quarter and a half started in Anadarko on Friday night, it looked like Anadarko was going to get revenge for that 55-41 game last year. But boy, oh boy, Vinny, the Owls came roaring back, and I didn't get a chance to watch a ton of it. I did watch the first touchdown that Trace Laura threw, I believe, to the younger Adesola.
Correct.
And man, just the weaponry that they have at Elgin. And I've been telling people, I've been like, and no offense, Billy, I hope you don't get offended by my use of terms here, but I've almost been preaching the gospel, if you will, of the Elgin Owls. And just anyone that will listen, I'm like, look, you don't get it. I know they're in a tough district, but Elgin is a force to be reckoned with, I feel like, in the next couple of years, because all those guys are back. I think they graduated maybe 10 people. And Trace Laura is a sophomore. Michael Adesola is a junior. Matt Lund, when the coaches told me, oh, by the way, Matt Lund, one of the fastest guys we have, he's only gotten stronger, and he's probably put on 15, 20 pounds of muscle. I was like, okay, that's going to be fun to try and tackle. And what was it that Elgin did well on Friday night that really impressed you the most?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first quarter and a half. I mean, was just sloppy and slow, and just things weren't clicking. It was kind of those. Anadarko had played in week 0, so it's kind of one of those. Okay, is this first game jitters? What's going on here? And then once kind of Elgin kind of settled down there about midway through the first quarter, I mean, it was 34 unanswered points. Lund kind of got rolling. Like you said, I don't know if he's gained much weight, but one thing that Coach Wyatt did talk about is he's gotten faster over the summer with track. And I mean, if he gets his head of steam going, I mean, you look up and he's 15, 20 yards downfield, and it doesn't even really look like it. And then Trace Laura, he's kind of the catalyst of everything. Smart kid, son of a coach, kind of a gym rat. Coach Wyatt talks about how he watches more film than he does. So he kind of always gets them in the right positions and kind of makes good reads and good throws and things like that. Like I said, he's only a sophomore. Brody Morrison, who's only a freshman, had a pick 6. A long pick six there when it made it maybe 28-14. Another freshman, number 34, Richard Meyer, scored one of the touchdowns in a goal line situation. So when you talk about it, I mean, it's nothing but freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. I mean, there's a couple seniors in there that are doing some pretty good things, don't get me wrong. But for the most part, this is a young team. And, I mean, I think that they've got a chance to kind of make some – I mean, I know it's their first year in 5A, and, yeah, it's a step up in competition. But when you look at the district that they're coming from in 4A1, I mean, that district top to bottom is pretty darn good. Some of those
really
teams,
tough, yeah.
right. Some of those teams
the fact that they finished 5th in that district last year was no small feat. And
then if you look at the kind of the bottom of that 5A district that they're in, I mean, some of those teams, I mean, they've got a chance to kind of shoot for maybe that 3rd, 4th, or 5th spot in that district.
For sure. Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting year for them, no doubt. And like I said, got one under our belt now, so looking forward to the Battle of Wichitas. I mean, I know Cache is going to be a tough opponent. They know each other well. They play each other every year. The coaching staffs know each other. So it's definitely going to be a tough one, but yeah, I like the way Elgin kind of operates on offense. And then on defense, they got a new defense coordinator coming over from MacArthur, and he has got those guys kind of running around. They're a little bit undersized to a certain degree, but I mean, they fly around and they are fast on defense. So with the track that they have there at Cache, and speed definitely will help. They're just going to have to, on defensive side of all, with all the shifts and motions and ball reversals and things like that Cache does, they'll just have to stay at home. So
that's that you hit the nail on the head. These are two schools that know each other very well. And you brought up the fact that, and I forgot about this, I do remember, I think my first Cache-Elgin game that I covered, you mentioning when I was invited on as the guest for y'all's pregame show, and you were like, you know, man, this is weird for me because I'm from Elgin and I live in Elgin, and I'm like trying not to get anyone hurt out here. But you mentioned about how you had worked with Elgin coming back. One thing you realize when you talk to these coaches is some of these coaches are so well connected and know each other. And Jack Baker, who you mentioned, coached at Elgin, whatever it was, 6-7 years ago. And so when I asked him was that a tough decision, he goes, no, not really, because I'm from here. Or like I've been here. I know what this is like. It just made more sense, like you said, Vinny. And Jack is somebody that I've gotten to know over the past few years from MacArthur. Great guy. And you know, that you brought up a good point though. That Cache offense, no matter who is involved getting the ball there, that's just a tricky offense to prepare for. And Billy, we saw a little bit in that Tuttle game. I mean, Tyler Harbin got a little. You know, I think he slowly kind of got more comfortable as the game went on as the new quarterback. But there are guys that those coaches really are just wringing their hands to get the ball in the hands of, whether it's, whether it's Connor Muldowney, whether it's Alex Lima, whether it's Drake Jones, whether it's Braden Castro. All those guys are really dangerous, and it's just a matter of getting the ball to them. And we saw that a little bit in the Altus game. From one game to the other, obviously the opponent was very different, but from one game to the other, what do you feel like Cache did better in game 2 versus game 1?
So the entire week before the Altus game, Griffin was riding both the offensive and defensive lines. He said, you guys got to give me more. And he said he would take them to the film room every single day. And so he said, expect them to be the ones that really kind of shine. And I think that's definitely what happened. They ran the ball very, very well. Now, I'll tell you this. They're not showing anything against Altus. They weren't going to show very much there at all. In fact, I think passing-wise, he said he wanted to get Harbin kind of comfortable early on in the game, but realized didn't really need to throw the ball. I think Tyler Harbin threw the ball just one time, and it was a completion to Drake Jones. So they got that sweep working really well. If you're going to see anybody have a big game, Connor Muldowney had a really good game last week. That jet sweep has to work, and I think really the key to the jet sweep is Braden Castro. I mean, the guy is the fastest guy on the team, at least, a guy that can really do something with the ball. He's a guy that's probably the most dangerous guy, and I think they haven't showed a lot with him, again, very intentionally early. kind of keeping the ball out of his hands. They don't want to give him the ball too much right now. I think they're going to play that up. On you back the years of like Hunter Tate and such, when you would give him the ball a whole bunch off that sweep, right? And you had Kynell back there in the backfield, or you can just, that's kind of your 1-2 punch. It's going to go one way or the other. It's really been more of a up the middle type of run game so far early in the year. So yeah, they've got a lot of weapons offensively. The key to this game, I think, is going to be, it's going to be up front. I mean, I think, what Cache can do against the Elgin defense is going to be interesting. And I'm still I think a little suspect of the Cache secondary right now. They're mostly inexperienced. And so I know Elgin has a ton of weapons on offense. I am a big fan of Lund. I think that guy is just a player. It's been interesting to watch in the last couple of years, because I think a couple of years ago they went to Tecumseh and they were really, really young. And Tecumseh was a playoff team that year. And Elgin had a couple really 2-3 years in a row, really, really tough years, and went there and hung with them. And, watched the video of that game, and they had freshmen playing all over the place. Now those freshmen are the guys that are kind of upperclassmen right now. And I'm really interested to see what they will do in 5A, because Vincent brought up a great point. 4A1, the district in 4A, they've been in a tough district. And so I don't think necessarily moving up to 5A is going to hurt them that much. I think they still are going to have a chance to maybe make the playoffs in their district there. But again, the key to this game, I think, is going to be up front. I don't know much about the Elgin offensive defensive line, but I know the Cache line is big. And of course, they have switched to the 3-4 defense this year. They, and it's like a lot of things, it can be turned into a 5-2 really quickly. Yeah. Those outside linebackers will creep up there, and it looks like a 5-2 most of the time. And so they did that because Griffin said they really didn't have prototypical defensive ends. And so it's turned into a 5-2. But it should be a really, really, really exciting game. I just, even though it's not a district game anymore, that really doesn't take away from it for me.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a rivalry game. So when it's a rivalry game, I mean, anything can happen. But yeah, I think that's going to be one of the biggest matchups there. I mean, can kind of those outside defensive ends, linebackers kind of keep up with Castro and those guys. What Tyler Harbin brings for Cache is something that they really haven't had since Griffin's been there, to my knowledge, is kind of a quarterback that he's kind of had a bunch of game managers and things like that, but now he's got a guy that's kind of an athlete. I'm not saying that Hunter Glenn wasn't an athlete, because when he got out in the open field, he did good things, but Tyler Harbin's just kind of a little bit different. So that's going to be something, obviously, that Elgin will have to key on there. That's a little bit different. You might see some more fakes out of the back door and things like that, with Harbin running the ball a little bit more than they have in the past. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's going to kind of come down probably to whether or not Laura can take advantage of Cache's secondary with all the weapons he's got there.
Yeah.
Well, and Billy, you were saying that you weren't really that familiar with the Elgin offensive line. I will tell you this: they're big. They're big and they're strong. And I mean, Nakona Tatanipa being the only real exception, which in terms of what he looks like, because as his coach told us, Coach Wyatt basically told me, he goes, "Man, I had to get on that guy because for baseball season, he shrunk. Like he shed weight." And he was like, "Why did you do that? Like, you're our center, man. Like, you can't do that." Yeah. But I mean, Keith Ferguson is a guy who big in stature, big in personality. You want to talk about a guy who during baseball season, I'm not sure if Keith got into a single game, but he was always talking. And whether it was to the opponent, to his teammates, to me, there's Mr. Brockenbush. And I was like, hello, hi, Keith. Good to see you. And it's going to be a fun rivalry. It's always fun. And I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pick a winner, and I'm not going to ask you guys to sit here and pick a winner, because we all
calling the game. We're going to pull a Kirk Herbstreit. We're calling the game. We can't make a pick.
You're correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. But I mean, that's not the only rivalry game this week. You have Lawton High and MacArthur. MacArthur played Eisenhower this past week. I was at that game. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think both coaches will vouch for me. That first half was not fun. That was not fun for anyone, because it was penalties, and it was a near. I don't want to overhype it. It was a near kind of brouhaha near the sideline at one point between players.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, these kids have known each other since they were in the first grade, most of them. It gets personal. And then to cap off, I mean, the only exciting part of that first half was the thought that we might have a scoregami, because I believe it was 8-2 with 2 minutes left in the first half. And then the blunder of blunders punt for Eisenhower goes off the up man's shoulder. People said it was blocked. It was not blocked, guys. It was not blocked. Go back and watch it. MacArthur recovers in the end zone. It's 16-2 at halftime, I believe. And then Eisenhower starts off the second half with a kickoff return for a touchdown, which I was like, okay, I'm awake now. Like, let's do this. And, Eisenhower, Javon Harris is one of those guys who, much like Eric Gibson before him, I think he is focused on interest, like making sure guys are interested to play football. And when he told me that the number of guys that he had at his first, off-season practice to like June 1st went up by like 15 or 20 kids, I was like, okay, you have my attention. And then on top of that, doing things the right way. After the game, kids jawing with MacArthur kids, he like looked like a parent ready to spank somebody. Like he was like, we don't do that. We don't do that here. And, you could tell he was furious, not just because of, mental things or letting the rivalry take over you. I think deep down he believed he had the better team. And Eisenhower defensively did so many things good. That defensive front is nasty with Kingston Tito. Jermaine Vu, when your Eisenhower and your top lineman gets hurt on essentially the first drive of the game, that hurts so much momentum-wise because he's playing both ways. I'm pretty sure he's their starting right tackle as well, if not left tackle. But Lawton High and MacArthur, I still haven't decided this week whether I'm going to be at that game or y'all's game. I'm sure you guys will put plenty of peer pressure on me. So, but we will see.
I'm interested. Lawton High first game. Of course, I don't know how good Duncan is right now, but man, Tyron Amaker.
It's fun.
It's fun. They finally put him where he needs to be, and the guy looks like a D1 athlete. I mean, he looks. He looks crazy.
Man, the almost the polar opposite of what I talked about with Keith Ferguson, where you can walk into a room and not know Tyron's in there. He's such a quiet kid. He doesn't really want, the accolades. When I interviewed him this summer, I'm like, what does it mean to you to be kind of a senior leader? And he goes, I don't know. I don't really know. It just means guys watch what I do, so I do it good. I'm like,
well, if he plays what he did Friday or Thursday night, he'll have to kind of get that figured out pretty quickly because he'll have to talk to the media.
You're gonna have to do a lot more interviews, kid. Yeah,
right.
And I gotta say, Devarius Hardy, Bubba as they call him, man, he has probably got the best combination of arm strength and foot talent that they have had at the quarterback position since I've been in Lawton. And I know I've only been here about 6 years, but
they haven't really let him throw the ball in the past a whole lot. So now they're kind of opening up a little bit. Man, that offense the other day looked so much different than last year.
And as you mentioned, we don't know a ton about Duncan. I know they're young. Chris Coots, their quarterback, gets hurt from what I understand. I didn't get to watch much of the game, but it was 14-14. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is I might need to flip over from the Oklahoma State game and watch some of this. And the next thing I see, it's like 49-14. And it was but it's not all high school football, as college football is in full swing now, as I'm pretty sure Vinny has a screen that he is checking glances at right now. On this Labor Day weekend. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State got their season started. I happened to be at home on Thursday night and watch a little bit of the OSU Central Michigan game while I was, of course, diligently editing my podcast with Billy from last week. But Oklahoma State looked really good in the first half, and then second half it was kind of meh. Spencer Sanders put on kind of a quintessential Spencer Sanders performance, except better, I feel like. Not really any turnovers to speak of, really good passing and running game. And then things just kind of got conservative in the second half. Give credit to Central Michigan. They have some dudes that really made OSU look like they missed Jim Knowles, if we're being honest. And I think it'll take Derek Mason a little bit, but I think he'll be fine. They get Arizona State this week. I think that the main takeaways from that game were the fact they were able to put up that kind of offensive performance without Jaden Bray. And then I feel like the two biggest single person, what do you call them? The single individual players who got the biggest ovation from the crowd was when Braylon Presley got his first touch of his college career, which was pretty cool. But the really cool part was Gunnar Gundy getting in for his first college game. That was
Yep.
And man, I know that I am not trying to say this to make y'all feel bad. I know I am the youngest person in this chat, but it did make me feel old knowing that that Gundy has a son on the team, and I'm pretty sure the Stillwater High School head coach, whose team I covered about a decade ago and who had very young kids at the time, pretty sure one of those kids is on the OSU football team now. I was like, oh, super cool. Pretty sure you weren't even in second grade when I last knew you. Actually, I guess technically you would have been older, but yeah, it's wild. And I think OSU, I think the biggest concern if you're an OSU fan is, no, you don't really have that gotcha game in the non-conference. I mean, Arizona State is not what they were a decade ago. And I think that's going to come into play because your first conference game is Baylor. And that's troublesome because if you're coming off of a game against, I forget if it's Missouri State or somebody like, come on, that's going to be tough. I mean, at least you have a bye week to recover any injuries, but yeah, that there's some room for improvement. We'll say that about the Cowboys. Then the Sooners got their season, got the Brett Venables era started. Billy, I assume you watched this game.
Yeah, it's. I'm cautiously optimistic. To me, it's still the honeymoon, right? I mean, it's like it's
can't do anything wrong.
But you watch it and you try to get out of that, and it's hard not to see, man, you know what? The problem is a lot of these guys, especially in the defense, the secondary, linebackers, they're just the same guys from the last year's team. So one of the biggest issues they've had the last couple of years has been in the secondary. And one of my biggest pet peeves, of course, they didn't play any man coverage at all this game. I think that will change some. I know Venables and Ruth, they like to play a lot of zone, but they will play man. They haven't played man at all. I mean, they didn't play any man. So linebackers really, really struggled in coverage. And they didn't, I mean, no press, no man, anything. And so honestly, playing against a team in UTEP who played week 0, lost 31-13 to North Texas, that, kind of got some of the kinks out a little bit. They still were giving them too much room. They're giving the receivers too much room. And that's been the complaint for the defense in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Now, what I did like defensively speaking, we'll talk about the offense in a minute, they hit harder. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, you could actually hear the pads hitting more. It was definitely they were more violent defense. Grimes, the defensive end, was a plus, 2.5 sacks. Ethan Downs had a sack. I think they had 6 sacks on the day. A couple of the young guys played okay. I think Billy Bowman out of Denton is a kid that's going to be just phenomenal. If he ever gets the ball, they also like to put him in the return game. Defensively is really where I'm still concerned, and I don't know that we're going to know much till Kansas State, maybe, probably Texas, honestly. That Nebraska game looks going to Lincoln still is Lincoln, but, man, Nebraska just doesn't look very good. And, of course, they weren't very good last year either, and OU struggled with them at home. So, offensively speaking, the issue I think Gabriel is going to be good. He looks fine. likes to throw the deep ball, maybe a little too much. That's okay. I get it. That's kind of the hype thing. He's there, and he's one of those guys who's an energy guy all the way. They don't have a running back. I'm just going to tell you right now, they don't have a running back. Eric Gray had a good game. Marcus Major, the Barnes kid, the freshman, I think maybe the best talent on the running back room. But his first carry goes for 9 yards and he fumbles the ball. So that's going to be their struggle. Their tight ends are phenomenal. The line looks super deep on the offensive side. Quarterback is okay. Receivers, they've got so many guys. I'm not worried there. I'm really worried about the running back room. Kennedy Brooks last year in the Texas game, I mean, just won that game for them. I don't think they have a guy that can do that right now. They're really putting a lot of it on Gray.
I think
they don't have one. They don't. Huh?
I think they'll find one because I think Levy is the type that Lincoln would just get rid of the run game. Where I think Levy will try and push it down your throat a little bit more, especially with the size of the offensive line and some of the offensive linemen that they have. So I think eventually they will find one. Gray's decent enough. Where I think they, like I said, ultimately, I think they will find one. And even if it might just be one of those situations where they go with the hot hand, because that's kind of what they did at Ole Miss last year with that offense. So I think they'll find one there. And then as far as the defense goes, like you said, Venables and things, I mean, his scheme will fix some of that, I believe.
But you still got to have talent.
You still have to have talent, and secondary's got to pick it up. The one good thing about it is, like you said, a lot of them are the same guys, but now they've got way more starts and way more playing time. And as you get more playing time and things like that, I mean, the games start to slow down. The schemes start to become easier. Reading your keys are a little bit easier and some of that type of stuff. So I think they're in an okay position. And then as far as OSU goes, yeah, I mean, Sanders looks good. He looks a little bit, like you said, he looked better than he did last year. Derek Mason's a good football coach. So ultimately, he's going to have those guys ready as far as defense goes. He's different than Knowles. So, I mean, he's not going to be as exotic and bring as much pressure and stuff there. But his scheme's pretty solid, and he's a good coach. All players love him and all that kind of stuff. So I think they're fine there as well. I think both of them are going to be, at the end of the year, top 15 teams potentially.
Yeah, and I think, going back to the OU defense a little bit, somebody told me the other day, they said, here's where we're going to see how good this Oklahoma coaching staff actually is, right there. Is the defense actually going to get better? And you're going to know, from week 1 to the end of the season, if they're a top, that, man, they've been struggling to be at the top 70, it seems like, in defense. And Brandon Venables is at Clemson, of course, top 5, top 10 defense every year. Oklahoma, he had a few of those as well. So I think if this coaching staff really is what we think it's supposed to be, they're going to get better every week, and defensively by the end of the year, again, they'll be better. Now, I think if they're a top 30 defense, probably, which would be a huge improvement, top 25 defense, and their offense, something about the offense as well. Man, Levy likes to go. Man, the tempo is insane. And so if you watch the broadcast, they said they have the offensive line trained. They practice on this, getting the ball to the official and back from the official so they can do it in such a quick time. They have players that know exactly what they're doing, so they can get it back, and they've got the ball back set down like in 2 seconds. It's insane.
Science, yeah.
It's so fast.
Yeah.
And their tempo is going to be wild.
The tempo is going to be wild. One thing that stood out to me, and I feel like whether it was Oklahoma or Texas, and you hear some of this sometimes with schools like Florida State, maybe, although they haven't been recruiting at the same level as OU and Texas in recent years. But one of the things that you hear from fans and people who, remember the glory days of some of those programs, and they look at all the amenities and all the recruiting, it should be working at some of these schools better than it is. And one thing that people are saying, and I say this as an Oklahoma State alum, sometimes you need the guys that aren't necessarily blue chip, but blue collar. 5 stars are great. Sometimes you need that 2 or 3 star that really has that chip on his shoulder, who's going to work his butt off for playing time, because you can't replace that fire in somebody. And if somebody's been told their whole life that they are, the bee's knees, they're going to maybe start to believe it. I'm not saying that specifically about any particular players, but one thing that stood out to me was seeing a guy like Gavin Freeman go out there, and a guy who was essentially a walk-on out of Heritage Hall. Granted, an extremely good player, but to go out there and essentially start for all intents and purposes, and then first touch, 46 yards.
Touch to the house, yeah.
And by the way, I apologize. My dogs are wrestling on the couch next to me. That's what's going on.
Well, I think too with
at the Brockenbush house, man.
I think with the transfer portal too. I mean, those 2- and 3-star kids are going to be even more important because the 5-star kid that doesn't win the job against the other 5-star kid's going to leave.
Exactly.
Now, unfortunately, so now a lot of when you look at teams as 2 deep, 3 deep, I mean, sometimes those second teamers are those 2- and 3-star kids, and you're one play away from kind of being the starter all of a sudden. So I think those kids are gonna have to really. I don't like the way the transfer portal is now, but
it's kind of a necessary evil at this point.
Right, it is what it is at this point. So I mean, you've got to make do with what you have, and I think, like I said, those 2- and 3-star kids are going to become more prevalent in some of these bigger programs because the 5-star that doesn't win against the other 5-star is going to get out of there.
It's definitely a case of one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I'm not calling people trash per se, but like,
wow, Glenn.
Yeah, right. You're trash, but you're my treasure. No, I mean, Vinny, as somebody with your rooting interest in terms of college football, I don't need to tell you. I mean, Tyron Johnson goes to LSU, the wide receiver, and doesn't live up to expectations. Whatever it was that happened there, goes to Oklahoma State and has a fine career and turns it into a pro career. And
I mean, he just never fit in at LSU. I mean, he was a 5-star, number one receiver in the country, and just really never fit in. Never could find his way into the lineup, but then transfers and goes and has a great career there at Oklahoma State. So I mean, that, like you said, I mean, with the transfer portal, it's good because it's giving kids opportunities to play elsewhere without having to sit out and do all that kind of craziness that they had back in the day. But then it's also bad where, I mean, you've got kids 2 games into the season saying, okay, I'm out of here, I'm done on the team this year. And I mean, that's the part you don't like. And it's hard with a bunch of college roommates and a bunch of college teammates and stuff like that are coaching in the college level now. I mean, their biggest thing is it's between that and NIL, it's you're more babysitting than coaching a lot of times. And it's frustrating to those guys because all they really want to do is coach. But they're having to, babysit and coddle this one and coddle that one and things like that. And it makes it a lot harder.
Coddle is exactly the word that I was about to blurt out.
it makes it a lot harder for those guys.
Yeah, no, it's I forget which game I was watching. I had to Google it. I guess it was the Arkansas game. Jaden Hazelwood is a name that I was like, oh wow, I completely forgot.
Man. Yeah.
Drew Sanders is another name that I was like, oh yeah, completely forgot. And you just have some of these guys that, and coming from a Texas A&M family, I was asking my dad, I was like, congrats on having like quote unquote the greatest recruiting class ever. Like 5 of those guys are going to leave. Like there's
watching game day Saturday morning. I think they said like 44% of D1 starting quarterbacks are transfers.
Yeah, I believe it.
I mean, that's just.
I mean, you think about the Heisman Trophy, 2017, 2018, and 2019, I think, were all transfer QBs in Baker, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow.
I did it in 2002, so I guess I started the trend.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Buddy.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, man, guys, this has been so much fun. And best of luck to both teams this week. You can watch both Vinny and Billy's work on the Oklahoma Sports Network. Of course, Billy with the Cache Bulldogs, Vinny now with the Elgin Owls. Battle of the Wichitas.
Check out the Elgin feed. It'll be much more entertaining.
And it has already begun. Game starts at 7. I believe coverage on both channels will start at 6:30 with pregame.
Yeah.
Should be a fun one, guys. And enjoy talking football with you guys always. I would love to have you on anytime. And you guys are always welcome.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Lynn.
Thanks for having us.
All
Billy,
right.
see you
For SpOKen
Friday.
Freely, I'm
All right,
Glen
bud.
Brockenbush.